Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo 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 Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya. Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Welcome. Sunday Feast. The title or theme of today's discussion is Lessons from the Great Transcendental Adventure. This is the Great Transcendental Adventure. This is a book that I wrote some years ago. The title, The Great Transcendental Adventure, was taken from a letter written by my spiritual master and the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada wrote in a letter to one of his early disciples who he was sending to Australia. At this time, in 1969, there was no one in Australia chanting Hare Krishna, but Srila Prabhupada wanted that the Krishna consciousness movement be spread everywhere. So one devotee, Balimardana, he was from the east coast of America. He expressed some interest in going to Australia to start the first temple of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And he wrote to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada wrote to him. And in one of the paragraphs in the letter he wrote, I take it for granted that you are one of the selected devotees of Lord Chaitanya, and therefore from within your heart he has inspired you to go to such a distant place, leaving your parents and home, just to satisfy Krishna. This is the great transcendental adventure. Try your best, and I'm sure you will be successful. So this was written in the end of 1969, beginning of 1970. And Balimaran did try his best, and it was successful. Prabhupada wanted that 10 temples be opened in Australia, and 10 temples and more were opened in Australia, plus farming communities, schools, etc. So this is a story of the early days of Krishna consciousness in Australia. Many books have been written about the expansion of the Krishna consciousness movement and of a biographical nature, of which this book is, about Srila Prabhupada by many different authors. Many books have been written about this, probably close to 20, I would say by now. And they are a subject matter a subject matter of interest for those who are interested in understanding what is the life of transcendental knowledge. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that the Sankirtan movement is a life of transcendental knowledge. What is a life of transcendental knowledge? What is a life based on transcendental knowledge? In fact, Arjuna asks that question to Krishna while stationed on the chariot before the battle of Kurukshetra was begun, and Arjuna asked Krishna, Arjuna Uvacha, Stita pragyasya ka bhasa samadhi stasya keshava stita di kim prabha sheta kim asita prajeta kim. The translation of that is, Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence. How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? Good question. How do you recognize someone who's advanced in Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada explains in the purport, there are symptoms for each and every man in terms of his particular situation. Similarly, one who is Krishna conscious has his particular nature. Talking, walking, thinking, feeling, etc. As a rich man has his symptoms by which he is known as a rich man. He might drive an expensive car, wear a $10,000 Rolex, live in a nice neighborhood in a fancy house. A rich man has his symptoms by which he is known as a rich man. A diseased man has his symptoms by which he is known as diseased. Or as a learned man has his symptoms. So a man in transcendental consciousness of Krishna has specific symptoms in various dealings. One can know his specific symptoms from the Bhagavad Gita. Most important is how the man in Krishna consciousness speaks. It is said that a fool is discovered when he opens his mouth. Someone can look very learned, but if he opens his mouth and starts speaking all sorts of stupid things, and you can tell immediately this person doesn't know what he's talking about. So as soon as you open your mouth, then you will be discovered if you are pretending. So a learned man, as soon as he speaks, can understand, because Prabhupada explains speech is the most important quality of any man. It is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak. And certainly a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks. But as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once. The immediate symptoms of a Krishna-conscious man is that he speaks only of Krishna and of matters relating to Krishna. Other symptoms then automatically follow, as stated below. And then Krishna goes on to explain, this is the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verse 56, etc. So in other words, just like there are symptoms of a transcendental person, those who have been fortunate to come in contact with such a person in the shape of Srila Prabhupada, have noted that those symptoms, as described by Krishna, were evident in Srila Prabhupada's everyday life. One godbrother of mine, Charu, who was one of the, in fact, Charu and his wife Vaibhavi, they had come from America. They'd become devotees in Sydney. They were they initially were my early teachers. Charu was the first temple president there in Sydney Temple in 1970. He noted that when Srila Prabhupada first came to Australia, that the first thing that struck him was there is no distinction between Prabhupada's private life and public life. He noted that normally with a public person, he has his public persona, and then when he gets off the stage or wherever he's presenting, he goes home and he's a different person. He maybe has some bad habits or maybe things like that. But the public person and the private person are different. But he noted that with Srila Prabhupada, he was with him all around the clock for a week in Sydney, and he noted immediately this person is the same under all circumstances, whether he's speaking in a packed town hall in front of 2,000 people, whether he's speaking in his room to one person, he's the same person, and nothing is compromised in his behaviour. So this is what he noted. Anyway, I'd like to read some sections today from the book in order to. It's like that clock has now stopped. You know, meddle with the clocks. Anyway, we're stuck on 3:30, but it's not. The book was a labour of love. It took me 5 years to interview devotees for this book, and it was a labour of love. This is a book describing Prabhupada's visits to Australia between the years of 1970, going back a little bit. He arrived in 1971, preliminary things before then, 1971 through to 1976. So this is a 6-year project which covers 6 years, and then Srila Prabhupada passed away in 1977. But Prabhupada visited Australia 6 times. We were actually very fortunate. There weren't many places where Prabhupada visited 6 years in a row. 71 through to 76 successively. So I'm going to read some sections from the book today. First of all, I'll read you something from chapter entitled Colonization by Sankirtan. Actually, Prabhupada also used that term. All these chapter titles are taken from Srila Prabhupada's letters. Colonization by Sankirtan. You know, when devotees go and chant Hare Krishna on the street, or chant Hare Krishna congregationally, this is Sankirtan. And distribute transcendental literature, that's Sankirtan. Distribute sanctified foods, that's Sankirtan. Distribution of transcendental knowledge and transcendental items, the holy name. Prabhupada wrote, what is this colonization by Sankirtan? He wrote, as formerly the Europeans made colonization in different parts of the world, it is the same thing, colonization by Sankirtan in Krishna consciousness. So this is chapter 6, and this is a description of Srila Prabhupada's third visit to Australia and New Zealand. And roughly speaking, today's talk will be describing Srila Prabhupada on a daily basis from the beginning of the day through to the end of the day. A typical day. Tuesday, 20th of February, 1973. During his travels in 1973, Srila Prabhupada continued his work of translation and commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. I think that beautiful box there, is the fruits of Srila Prabhupada's translation of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada said, just like as a drop of water gradually wears away a stone, even though a stone is very hard and water is very soft, yet if the water drips for years and years and years on a stone, it will actually wear away the stone. Prabhupada said, similarly, I rise every morning at 1 o'clock and translate a little bit of Srimad Bhagavatam every day, and as a result, the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Purana, was presented for the English-speaking world. During his travels in 1973, Srila Prabhupada continued his work of translation and commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Canto 4. Often Prabhupada was quite a way ahead of the editors and the devotees who were arranging the printing of the books. And he would encourage them, you have to speed up because I'm ahead of you. So Canto 4, and despite Prabhupada's advanced age, in 73, Srila Prabhupada was 77 years old. Despite his advanced age, the disruptive travel hours, the jet lag, the tedious inconvenience of airport stopovers and aggressive customs officers, Prabhupada demonstrated great determination by maintaining his writing schedule wherever he went. Here in Auckland, New Zealand, was no exception. His literary paraphernalia, his dictating machine and reference books were all unpacked and set up on his low desk. He was ready to write. Wherever he was, Srila Prabhupada was always steady. As he had once commented, no place is my home. My home is at the lotus feet of Krishna. Early, At about 1 a.m., Prabhupada rose from his bed and turned on the light. Prabhupada had no alarm clock, and no one had come to wake him. He had risen on his own. The house was cold and quiet. Wrapping his chadar around his shoulders, he sat quietly behind his desk. The whole temple was dark except for Prabhupada's desk lamp. Putting on his reading glasses, Prabhupada opened his books and turned on his dictating machine. He studied the Bengali and Sanskrit texts, then picked up the microphone, flicked the switch to record, and began speaking, dictating no more than a phrase at a time, speaking and pausing. He would sit straight, sometimes rocking and nodding his head as he spoke. Prabhupada worked on. He was following what had become a vital routine in his life, rising early and writing the parampara message of Krishna consciousness, putting aside all other considerations, disregarding present circumstances. He would merge into the timeless message of transcendental knowledge. This was his most important service to his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. The thought of producing more books and distributing them widely inspired him to rise every night and translate. Prabhupada worked until the Auckland sky started to glow with approaching dawn. Then he stood, picked up his beads, and chanted Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada was at an advanced age, yet he was sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night. And he was very concerned not to waste a moment of time, because he knew at his advanced age he had the mission to write all of these books. In fact, it is described in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami that there are certain symptoms, more symptoms, apart from the ones that Krishna is going to explain to Arjuna in answer to his question in the Gita. Symptoms of one who is on this advanced transcendental platform. One of them is avyata kala vam, which means the concern that not a moment of time be wasted outside of the service to Krishna. Every day at home we read, my wife and myself read a chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and we're studying chapter 10 at the moment. And in chapter 10 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna lists to Arjuna some of these opulences. Chapter 10 is called Vibhuti Yoga, opulence of the Absolute. And he lists 83 different opulences, personalities or groups of personalities that represent Krishna. Krishna is representative. He's represented in those personalities or items. And in the first one he lists, he says, Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarva Bhutasaya Stita. And Prabhupada notes in his purport that Krishna addresses Arjuna as Gudakesha, because Arjuna has different names, Krishna has different names according to his pastimes. It's the same in human society. Sometimes people have nicknames, or they have pet names, names that their grandmother calls them, or their uncle, etc., etc. So anyway, Arjuna, just like Krishna, has different names: Govinda, Shama Sundara, Bhagavan, etc. Arjuna has different names, and one of Arjuna's names is Gudakesha. Gudak means sleep, and Isha means controller. Controller of sleep. Gudakesha means one who can control his sleeping tendency. Apparently Arjuna had conquered the tendency to sleep. In fact, in the Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna that one cannot be a yogi if he eats too much, or sleeps too much, or eats too little, or sleeps too little. One has to get the proper balance. And it's also said that when one becomes older, he needs less sleep. You know, babies, how much sleep does your baby get a night? all over? Definitely more than 8, yes. Well, he's a bit of a yogi then. But as you get older, you need less sleep. And Prabhupada actually said that if you sleep more than 6 hours, the tendency is that you will become influenced by the mode of ignorance. And so he asked his disciples, 6 or 7 hours is a good amount of time. If you sleep, I was just calculating this morning when I was on my morning walk, but my father is now 95. Let's say you live for 90 years, but you sleep for 8 hours a night, then you slept for 30 years, right? You spent 30 years of your life asleep. Right? That's pretty scary. Just imagine how much work you could get done if you could sleep less. In fact, oftentimes in the early days, the devotees had so much service, they said, Prabhupada, I don't even have time to chant. Prabhupada would meet the devotees when he arrived from the airport and say, how's everything, how's it going? And sometimes he would say, so is everyone chanting? There's 16 rounds, and he would look around the room. Some devotees would look down. Oh, are you chanting your 16 rounds? And, no, Srila Prabhupada. And I don't have enough time. So Prabhupada said, well, then sleep less. Sleep less. So sleep is a distraction. I mean, of course, sleep is necessary. We need to sleep. Otherwise, if you don't sleep, you'll die. You need to sleep. You need to rest the body. But the art is not to sleep too much. And when you are completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness, you have so much to do and so little time, you generally just do whatever's necessary. The 6 Goswamis in Vrindavan, sometimes they would sleep half an hour at night. Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami. Sometimes they hardly had time to sleep. All their service and their writing and their chanting. If they could catch 15, 20 minutes, they would be happy. And so here is an example of someone, Srila Prabhupada, who has transcended the need for excessive sleeping. And he would rise. He didn't have some noisy alarm clock or some beeping cell phone. Prabhupada would just take rest at 11, 11:30, and he would rise at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And he would write every single day, just a couple of hours. And as a result, Prabhupada wrote 80 books. So this is an example of using one's time nicely in the service of Krishna. This is practical demonstration of bhakti yoga. I'd like to read now, taking Srila Prabhupada's day as in a chronological manner. Prabhupada would then rise from his desk. Prabhupada, he liked to have a low desk about this height, maybe a little bit higher, and he would sit cross-legged behind his desk on the floor on a cushion, and he would write, and then he would stand up and he would chant Hare Krishna on his beads. He would pace up and down often in his room, and then he would slip on his shoes and go on a morning walk. And Prabhupada would go on a morning walk every day for his health as an elderly gentleman. He was advised by a medical friend that he should walk every day for optimum health. So when we came in contact with Srila Prabhupada in the early days, he started his morning walks routine, and he would walk every day very, very briskly. Young disciples in their late teens, early 20s, couldn't keep up with Srila Prabhupada. I remember going on a morning walk with Prabhupada on Juhu Beach. Juhu Beach is in Bombay. Has anyone been to Juhu Beach? Very nice. And it was a long walk. The walk went on and on and on. Prabhupada was walking 45 minutes on the sand, which is very hard to walk on. I think it was almost an hour. And then we would turn around and we knew that there was another whole hour just to come back. And some devotees would just drop off. They couldn't keep up. I was having a hard time. And Prabhupada was walking so quickly, pacing so fast. It was almost like it was always faster than you could keep up. So Prabhupada would go on a morning walk, and sometimes he would talk. He would stop, and devotees would stop, and they would gather round, and he would speak. Sometimes he didn't speak at all. Sometimes he would speak extensively. From 1973 onwards, all those morning walk conversations were recorded by Prabhupada's secretary. So you'll find hundreds and hundreds of morning walk conversations that were recorded, and they're available. You can listen to them online for free. And so this is a morning walk. This was a morning walk that took place on Tuesday, the 20th of May, 1975. This was Prabhupada's fifth visit to Australia. And this was in Melbourne, Australia. In the Melbourne Botanic Gardens. Prabhupada said out of all the gardens that he visited, the Melbourne Botanic Gardens he thought were in the top of the range gardens. Prabhupada had visited many, many beautiful gardens in Mexico City and you name it. All sorts of hundreds of different venues. The morning walk in the Botanic Gardens was spiced with lively questions and answers. Hari Sori cited a recent newspaper article advertising a new book on the evolution of man. That sounds familiar. The book claimed that there were approximately 2 million varieties of life on the planet. Prabhupada did not agree. 2 million? No. 8,400,000. That's described in the Padma Purana. Jalaja Navalakshani, Stavara Laksha Vimsati, etc. Describes that altogether there are 8,400,000 different species of life. So, in other words, Prabhupada was critical of modern scientific conclusions that keep changing. It's just speculation. How do you know how many species of life there are? And then how is it that your number keeps changing? Prabhupada would challenge them. Amoga asked whether the 400,000 species of human beings described in the Padma Purana were calculated according to national division. So 8,400,000 species of life, 8 million different species of life except for humans. In other words, reptiles, fish, plants, etc., beasts, and 400,000 species of human life. He said, Amoga asked, was this 400,000 species of life, human life, calculated according to national division? Prabhupada said, no, this is a foolish idea. The Shastra, he said, the scripture is talking of planets, not countries. So there was no such thing as national. He said, we are talking of planetary systems. So amongst all the planets, there were 400,000 different human forms. A devotee inquired about the connection between rainfall and sinful life. Prabhupada answered, the more you become sinful, Prabhupada explained, the more the rains will decrease. Irregularity of weather is nature's punishment. There is a common saying in Bengal, Dine jol ratri e tar, sei janme sukada. If it rains heavily during the daytime, and at night I see the stars, then you should know that there will be scarcity of rain, and then scarcity of food grains. Best thing is that at night there must be heavy rain, and during the daytime there should be sunshine. Then the field will be very fertile. There are many countries in the world where everything is very, very lush, and you'll notice that they have very heavy rain at night, like in the tropical countries. And during the daytime, you get up and it's all nice and bright. This is a natural condition. So Hari Sori asked, if we increase the Krishna consciousness movement, Prabhupada answered his question, yes. He said, then it will be regular. So basically, the more activities that are performed on earth, by human beings that are against the laws of nature, the more the weather conditions will become disrupted. So in other words, Prabhupada's pointing out there's a connection between human behavior and the weather. And of course the weather and global warming and all these massive topics are always discussed. But the real situation is that the more human beings deviate from proper behavior, the more disrupted the earth will become. Prabhupada's party approached the northern end of the Nymphia Lily Lake. It's a very beautiful lake at the Melbourne Botanic Gardens. The early morning light emphasized the carpet-like appearance of the lawn where coots and sooty black moorhens grazed. Spotted turtle doves blinking nervously uttered their persistent coo-coo-coo sound. Prabhupada paused, his face surrounded by the brown woolly border of his pink, warm pink coat. You'll see some pictures of Prabhupada on those morning walks. He's wearing a pink coat with a faux fur border that a devotee made for him. He liked it very much. When he was visiting cold countries, he would wear it. You'll see that coat in many pictures. He asked, to no one in particular, why are there so many varieties of life? Prabhupada was playing the devil's advocate. Amoga attempted to answer. Well, the scientists say that originally there was just one cell, and by adaptation in some circumstances, one kind would live and another would die. So all these varieties adapted to different conditions. Prabhupada looked at Amoga quizzically. Who adapted this? Who managed this? Well, said Amoga, they say accidentally. Prabhupada made a sour face. This is nonsense, he said. Nothing happens accidentally. There must be some arrangement. What is happening accidentally? If you believe in accident, then you should not endeavor for anything. If, for instance, he gave the example, if accidentally you can become rich, why are you struggling so hard to become so? Why your motor cars are flying the whole day and night here and there? Why are you trying to become rich? People have to drive to work hard and then drive home. Let accidentally you become rich and sit down. Why go to the office? Why go to the college? Let accidentally you become MA, PhD. This is all rascal. Harishori presented the argument of karma mimamsa. Karma mimamsa philosophy is that summed up in this question. Couldn't one argue that by man's endeavour alone all things are happening? Prabhupada answered by clarifying his point. Two things must be there, activity plus the sanction of God. Even if a so-called accident occurred, Prabhupada explained, then that so-called accident was happening by God's will. Their argument is, Harishori continued, that if God is there and he's actually the ultimate controller and he's motivating everything and everything to happen, then can I just sit back and do nothing and things will happen? Prabhupada shook his head. No, you should work for the result, but do not think that because you are working very nicely that the result will come. The result is not in your hands. Therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Karmani eva adhikaraste ma paleshu kadachana. Your duty is to go on working, but don't expect the results as you desire. It will never happen unless it is sanctioned. So in other words, this idea of accident, there is no such thing as an accident. In other words, for instance, 350 people all book their tickets to fly from Dublin to Los Angeles. Imagine the scenario. All these 350 people, none of them know each other, except there's a few couples and maybe a family or two. But otherwise, you arrive at the airport and you've never seen these people before, and you're, oh, everyone in this queue is going on the same flight. Yes, there it is, Dublin to LA. And everyone gets on the plane. The 350 people get on the plane to fly from Dublin to Los Angeles. And then, God forbid, there's a terrible accident, and the plane goes down somewhere, and everyone dies on that flight. So it's described as an accident. There was a terrible airline accident, and all these people were killed. I mean, there's so many air flights where the same scenarios happen. So it's an accident. It's an accident because all of those people were destined to die at that moment, and they've all been brought together by the unfathomably complicated laws of karma. And everyone was booked to get on that flight and not arrive at the destination. Now, it appears like an accident, but it is actually an arrangement by higher authorities. Just like you hear, and whenever these accidents occur, people, you hear these stories. I was meant to be on that flight. Oh my God, I was meant to be on that flight, but I slept in that morning. Or I was meant to be on that flight, but I was so sick I couldn't make it to the plane. And then people say, well, there was, the flight staff, at the last minute, somebody didn't show up for their being on as part of the flight staff, so we had to pull in some extra people to replace them. Because those people were meant to die on that flight, and the people that didn't make it to the airport, they were destined not to die that day. They had a different karma. So there is so-called accident, but behind accident there is a whole lot going on that we can't see. So that was the point that Prabhupada was making. Now, this question of working for the results, working but allowing the results to happen according to how they happen. We work hard. Doesn't mean you don't work hard, but you leave the results to Krishna. Prabhupada gave a practical example. He said, just like a man is suffering, your duty is to appoint a nice physician and medicine. It's like you have a relative and he's struck down with some terrible disease. So as a close, loving relative, your duty is to find a specialist, immediately get that person to the hospital for medical treatment. Just like a man is suffering, your duty is to appoint a nice physician and medicine. But is there any guarantee that he will live? Why does he die? You can say, I have given all the best medicine and the best medical treatment, still he dies. Therefore, you may try your best with full energy and by all means, but without the supreme will of God, the result will not come. Prabhupada described how this idea could be imbibed by the devotees in our Krishna consciousness movement. He said, we shall try our best to carry out our duty to our spiritual master. Even if we are not successful, it does not matter. Krishna will recognize that we are laboring hard for him. Then it will be noted down by him. Whether one man is converted to Krishna consciousness or not, that is not our business. Rather, our business is to be recognized by Krishna. Prabhupada would often say, just do your best and leave the result to Krishna. You have to go and do your duty, just like when I came to your country, Prabhupada said. This was in 1975. This was 10 years after Prabhupada had arrived in the West. Prabhupada was looking back. Just like when I came to your country, I never expected any success. But I knew as soon as I will say, no illicit sex, no meat eating, which were two of the rules that Prabhupada required of his serious disciples. He said, as soon as because I knew that as soon as I will say, no illicit sex, no meat eating, then they will reject me immediately. The devotees huddled close as Prabhupada's voice took on a soft, humble tone. So, he said, I was not hopeful at all, but it was your kindness that you accepted me. But I never expected that these people would accept. I never expected. My spiritual master was publishing one paper known as the Nadia Prakash. It was worth 1 or 2 paisa. And if a brahmachari sold even a few copies, he was very glad. The collection was not even 4 annas. How much is an anna? I think it was 1/100th of a paisa. And a paisa is 1/100 of a rupee. Is that correct? Yes. If a brahmachari sold even a few copies, he was very glad. The collection was not even 4 annas. Still, he was so appreciative and glad. Oh, you have distributed so much. Still, our business is to carry out the order and not to look for success. So Prabhupada returned from his morning walk every day at about 7 or 7:30 in the morning. And if you've been to a big Hare Krishna temple, who's been to Soho Street Temple in London or Bhaktivedanta Manor in London? Anyone? And any big temple, like so many big temples in Europe, every day the deities are dressed very beautifully, and then the doors open at 7:30 in the morning, and there's an arati ceremony, and everyone comes together, and there's kirtan and darshan of the deity. So Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada would return from the morning walk just in time. He was expert in calculating the time. So even if he was on a walk in Bombay on Juhu Beach, which was for miles and miles and miles and miles, sometimes the devotees would say, Prabhupada, I think it's time we turn around now. Prabhupada said, no, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. And then he'd turn around and come back, and they would return at the temple just in time for darshan. And then there would be a class, a morning class on Srimad Bhagavatam. So many thousands or hundreds and hundreds of Bhagavatam classes that have been recorded. And you can hear those classes, wonderful classes on Srimad Bhagavatam. Sometimes Prabhupada would speak on Chaitanya Charitamrita, usually Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Prabhupada would return to his rooms, and his secretaries and servant would conduct their daily affairs. There would be cleaning going on and correspondence. And one of his disciples would be was allocated to cook for Srila Prabhupada's lunch. And on this particular visit to Melbourne in 1975, Shruti Kirti Prabhu was Prabhupada's servant and cook. And Shruti Kirti, of course, has written his own books on his time with Srila Prabhupada. Wonderful books. Shruti Kirti was not a fancy cook, but his preparation of Prabhupada's daily lunch, split mung dal, rice and chapatis, and a couple of simply spiced sabjis, so wrong, was always predictably punctual, hot and palatable. Prabhupada just wanted 3 things: that the prasadam that was cooked was hot, that it was edible, and it was on time. Prabhupada was very punctual. He would take his noon bath every day, take bath at noon approximately. Sometimes he would be in his room speaking to guests, and sometimes it would run a little late, but he didn't allow it to run very late. He would then take his noon bath. He preferred to have a bucket bath. There was 1 bucket of hot water, 1 bucket of cold water, and Prabhupada would, and with a scoop, with a cup, and Prabhupada would bathe like that, like they do in civilized cultures of the world. And you could calculate how much hot water and cold water could be mixed in order to get your ideal temperature. And Prabhupada would take his bath. And then he would change into fresh clothes, apply tilak, and then he would take his lunch. Now, as I said, Prabhupada, he only requested food that was hot, on time, and edible. Sometimes devotees wouldn't cook very well, and Prabhupada would point out to them that, you know, if they've done something wrong, perhaps they could improve. Upendra he used to put so much ghee in his sabjis. Prabhupada said, "You're using so much ghee that it slips down my throat too quickly and I can't even taste it." So Prabhupada didn't want rich, deep-fried foods. He simply seasoned light steamed vegetables or pan-fried. A couple of sabjis, 2, maybe 3. If 3 was the maximum, you wouldn't need any more than 3 different sabjis. He suggested that they don't put the same vegetables in each. One visit, Prabhupada visited Australia and Banu, Brahmachari at the time. He put paneer cheese in all 3 sabjis. That was it, not necessary. Just you can put paneer cheese in one, and don't put tomato in every single vegetable. Make them different so there's some variety. Variety is the spice of life. And rice, hot rice, some dal, and chapatis. That was his most popular. Well, that was his recommended lunch. That's what he recommended their cooks prepare: dal, rice, chapatis, and some. Prabhupada said actually that when he was a young man, he had no taste for eating chapatis. Had no taste for eating chapatis. He preferred puris. Always preferred puris. But then he said as he got older, his tastes changed, and then he preferred chapatis. But he wanted that his chapatis would be hot. They had to be hot. And they had to be, so the cooks would cook the chapati one at a time, and then they would run it into his room and put the chapati there on the plate. So it was so hot that when you pressed it with your fingers, steam would come out. That's a chapati. If you've been to a good restaurant in India and they bring you chapatis, and they're not so hot that you can press them and steam comes out, then you can tell them to take it back to the kitchen and they won't complain. They know that you have good taste. So the chapatis should be hot, and the rice should be very hot. And Prabhupada, he liked to have plain rice, and he asked that they put it in a container because he wouldn't eat his rice straight away. Sort of Gujarati style, not exactly. Prabhupada would take chapatis and some sabji, and then a little bit of chapati mixed with dal, and then another bit of chapati mixed with dal and sabji, and like that. And then when he'd had enough chapatis, maybe 3 or 4 chapatis, then he would open up the little tiffin lid, and there'd be hot rice. It was still steaming. And then he would take the steaming rice, and he would mix the rice with the little sabji rice with the dal. But very simple prasad. And devotees would often, they would try, especially the ladies, they would try to make all sorts of fancy, exotic things, but probably not very impressed. That was not his taste. He had very simple tastes. Especially in America, they would try to offer Prabhupada all sorts of brownies and donuts, giant donuts, all sorts of American food. Prabhupada actually said, I prefer my sandesh and rasagula. Prabhupada had simple taste. Having a lot of practice, Shruti Kirti was able to efficiently cook everything in a very short time. Srila Prabhupada sometimes took pleasure in telling people, Shruti Kirti cooks my whole meal in 15 minutes, not 3 or 4 hours. That's a note to all cooks. Actually, Prabhupada did say that deity worship should take maximum 1 hour, and cooking maximum 1 hour. And if you're spending any longer than 1 hour, then you're just wasting time. And Shruti Kirti took 15 minutes to have everything cooked. He had his 3-tier cooker, so everything was cooking at different levels. And at the same time, Prabhupada, Shruti Kirti was giving Prabhupada his noon massage. Prabhupada would take a massage every day for his health. And while he was having his massage, the lunch was cooking in the kitchen. Shruti Kirti was very expert. During Prabhupada's stay in Melbourne, Shruti Kirti followed the same tried and tested procedure. As the dal, rice and sabji all steamed simultaneously in the cooker, Shruti Kirti gave Srila Prabhupada his massage. The massage done, Prabhupada entered his bathroom. Although the clean white ceramic tile room was equipped with a shower, Prabhupada preferred to take his bath simply using buckets. Before the massage, Prabhupada had set up one stainless steel bucket of hot water, one of cold water. Now Prabhupada combined the water to the preferred temperature, crouching down, bathed in the traditional way that he had done his whole life. As Prabhupada bathed, Shruti Kirti went downstairs, added spices to the dal and the vegetables, and rolled and cooked hot chapatis. Today was particularly chilly, so Shruti Kirti had decided to prepare the substantial and nourishing winter chapatis that Prabhupada had once shown him how to make. Heating some milk, this is a nice recipe, heating some milk in a small saucepan, Srila Prabhupada added sufficient lemon juice to curdle it. Then he added the atta flour to the hot curds and whey. So there was the saucepan, there was some milk which had curdled, and there was, as you know, there was the curds floating on top and the whey underneath, and then tip the atta into the saucepan of hot curds and whey and make the dough. And then, these were called winter chapatis. They're very substantial and tasty. Heating some milk in a small saucepan, Shruti Kirti added sufficient lemon juice to curdle it. Then he added the atta flour to the hot curds and whey, mixing it, kneading it like regular chapati dough. As Shruti Kirti busily completed his cooking duties in the kitchen below, Prabhupada dressed and sat behind his low marble table. William Kerr had been given carte blanche to film Srila Prabhupada. You might have seen online there's many YouTube videos of Prabhupada. There's one, Prabhupada putting on tilak in his room, and that's part of a lot of footage that was made of Srila Prabhupada in Australia. Hours and hours of footage. There were many devotee cameramen. If you were here recently, some months back, there was the screening of the Srila Prabhupada's film, and we had an evening with Vishaka and Yadubara, devotee filmmakers par excellence. So they took many, many films. There was film footage all the way, actually, even before they came to Krishna consciousness. There was film footage back from 1966 in San Francisco in Golden Gate Park, and 1966 in Tompkins Square Park, and of course there are many other rolls of film that were discovered since then. So you can see footage of these early morning walks and early kirtans. And in Australia we had this cameraman. He was a professional cameraman and his crew, and he volunteered to film Prabhupada's lectures in the Melbourne Town Hall, lectures in Jesuit seminaries, morning walk conversations, temple lectures, initiations, and even he asked permission to film Srila Prabhupada in his room as he was putting on his tilak, and intimate things like that. And those films are all extant, and you can see the great poise and aristocratic demeanour of Srila Prabhupada. It's quite amazing. William Kerr had been given carte blanche to film Srila Prabhupada. Wanting some footage of Prabhupada alone in his room, William had decided to set up his equipment while Prabhupada bathed. Now as the camera rolled silently, Prabhupada placed several tiny spoonfuls of water in his left palm. Rubbing a ball of Vrindavan clay into the water, he made a moist paste-like mixture. He then applied the clay markings of Vaishnava tilak, dipping into the yellowish paste in his left hand with the ring finger of his right. He scraped the wet clay from his palm, and while looking into a small ivory compact mirror, which Prabhupada held in his fingers like this, so he would hold up the mirror like this, and then Prabhupada would apply the tilak like this, while he was holding it. Prabhupada marked a vertical clay strip up his forehead. He then trimmed the clay into two parallel lines by placing the little finger of his right hand between the eyebrows of the right hand, and running it upward past the hairline, clearing a path in the still moist clay. Then, reaching quickly under his shirt, he applied 11 other places tilak on his body as directed by the Vaishnava Smriti. William, who's behind the camera, peered into his viewfinder, panned quickly across Prabhupada's desk. You can see that in the film. Past his japa beads, silver drinking goblet, spectacle case, gold cross pen. The one devotee gave Prabhupada a gold cross pen. I don't know if you know that pen. Very slim golden pen. We all got cross pens when we found that out. I used to have one. Really good. Very nice. Very nice pen. Prabhupada liked that pen very much. Gold cross pen. And dictaphone. He zoomed in close enough, he zoomed in close just as Prabhupada, facing the picture of his spiritual master, began silently reciting the Gayatri mantra. William captured on film Prabhupada's methodical, aristocratic, yet delicate movements, holding his Brahmana's thread upward, looping it around his right thumb. He sat erect, looking slightly downwards, moving his lips as he chanted the mantra. As Prabhupada finished, right on cue, Srila Kitty returned with his lunch. Prabhupada preferred to take his lunch alone. When it was time for prasadam, Prabhupada would become very grave. He didn't sit and chat. It was not chit-chat time. Prabhupada would know that this is actually Krishna prasadam. This is Krishna. And therefore, he would respect it in silence. And in fact, in Melbourne, he would have he had this little, he couldn't be distracted, and he would just take prasadam. In other words, Prabhupada's body language was, do not disturb. Prabhupada wanted to absorb himself in prasad seva, service to Krishna in the form of prasadam. Srila Kirti returned. Prabhupada also said on a number of occasions that if you're taking prasadam with others, then there can be conversation, but it should be light conversation. Because according to your consciousness when you take prasadam, that affects your digestion also. So no bad news while you pick up your spoon to eat your lunch and some bad news, and then you say, oh, by the way, your house has just been broken into and everything's been stolen. Oh, thanks. No bad news, no tragedies, no arguments. I remember when I was growing up, every mealtime there was an argument. Sometimes my sister would throw the plate dramatically across the table and storm out. Anyway, too much information. But no, there can be light conversation. And joking conversation is nice. Because if your mood is light, then you'll be able to digest nicely. Prabhupada preferred to take his dal and vegetables with chapatis first. Tearing off a piece of chapati with his right hand, he wrapped it around a morsel of vegetable or dipped it into the dal. Srila Kitty had the hot rice in one tier of his cooker, sitting tightly lidded on Prabhupada's table. After eating about 3 or 4 chapatis, Prabhupada finished off the meal with hot basmati rice, which he mixed with the remainder of the dal and vegetables according to his taste and appetite. Srila Prabhupada spoke one Vedic axiom that you should dress according to the taste of others, but you should eat according to your taste. In other words, if people expect you to come to a meal dressed in a formal gear and you come in shorts and a ripped t-shirt, then you'll be, it will cause a disturbance. So, dress according to how people would expect you to dress, but eat according to your own taste. And like I said, there are no rules for eating. One rule for some person will be a different rule for another. So eat according to what you can digest and eat according to your taste. In the early days, when Prabhupada came to America, no one knew how to cook what he was, cooking. So Prabhupada himself personally would cook back in 26 2nd Avenue in New York. So Prabhupada would cook the lunch. And he would have 20 or 30 hungry New York boys and girls coming to join him for lunch. So it was not unusual that Prabhupada would cook 100 chapatis himself on his own. And then gradually some devotees showed interest. So he said, I can show you how to cook. Krishnananda and Umapati. So he trained them how to cook. But at first Prabhupada was cooking everything. Not only that, but all the boys and girls, they would take lunch and then they would just stand up, leave their plates on the floor. We were just I wasn't there. I hadn't met the devotees yet, but not coming from very cultured backgrounds. And then just stand up and say, "Thanks, Swamiji," and walk out. And then there'll be like 30, 40, 50 plates and cups strewn across the floor. So Prabhupada would pick everything up and wash it. And then he'd go into the kitchen and wash all the pots. And until someone offered their services. Prabhupada said, "Yes, if you'd like to help." Prabhupada didn't actually ask the devotees to do anything, but he waited for them to volunteer and accept the service. And there was one devotee called Srila who was a little bit strange. And it was a little bit strange. And he had this like unnatural appetite. He used to eat like 20 chapatis. And he was still hungry. And then the rumor got around when Prabhupada said, "Yes, it's normal to have 2 or 3 chapatis at lunch and dal and Srila I think that was his name. He got very disturbed. He went to Prabhupada and said, "Prabhupada, I heard you said we should just eat 2 or 3 chapatis." And Prabhupada said, No, if you want 10, 20 chapatis, we can give you. He said, "You should just eat whatever you can digest." Very relieved. So Prabhupada said, you should eat according to your taste. And one person's taste is not necessarily another's. Finally, Prabhupada rose, washed his hands and mouth, and prepared to rest a while on his couch. Prabhupada had slept 2-3 hours that night, and then after lunch he would rest on his couch, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours perhaps, afternoon. And then he would get up and continue on all the way through till 11, 11:30 that night. Room conversations. There were many recorded room conversations because the devotees would arrive, would arrange many guests, many guests to come to speak with Srila Prabhupada wherever he was in the world, whether it be the Bishop of Melbourne or the Chief Cardinal of France, Cardinal Danielu, whether it be with Allen Ginsberg, the famous beat poet, or whether it was just the mother of a devotee, or scholars from various universities, Indologists, all sorts of different people. I had so much more to read here, but I'm running out of time. Prabhupada met the Mormons. Some Mormons came to the temple, and they wanted to knock at the door, and they wanted to know if we would like to hear about their philosophy. And the devotees said, "Well, actually, our spiritual master is here right now. Would you like to meet him?" And they said, "Yes." Okay. As you know, Mormons are very polite, extremely polite. They accepted the invitation to come in. And there's a nice room conversation with the Mormons.
You shaved them up?
Huh?
You shaved them up?
No, not quite. Prabhupada he sold them a book. Prabhupada sold them in the Sri Upanishad, signed copy. Yes, I've got so much to read, but I think we might have run out of time, and unfortunately that isn't the time. I could read a small section here. This is a room conversation in 1976 with some Mormons, elder, I hope we can get their names, 2 elders, as they know, from the Mormon church. After lunch, Srila Prabhupada met with 2 young men from the Mormon church. This was in Melbourne. They were respectful, as always, and seemed to appreciate the disciplined life of Krishna consciousness. "What do you feel is the greatest order of God?" asked one. "To surrender to him," replied Srila Prabhupada. The conversation was long and amicable. It's actually on tape. Although Prabhupada did not compromise his stance, particularly on meat eating. Prabhupada was very strict in his conversations with Christians. He was speaking in France to Cardinal Danielu, the chief cardinal of France, who said he couldn't see anything wrong in eating meat, because otherwise what would the women and children eat? They didn't eat meat. Prabhupada was saying, this is nonsense. Thou shalt not kill. What about the commandments? So often Prabhupada would try to counter their foolishness by explaining to them very clearly that meat eating does not lead to religious life. It is irreligion. And often they would not be able to get it. They wouldn't get it. Carlo Danielu in Paris didn't get it. What do you feel is the greatest order of God? To surrender to him, Prabhupada said. The conversation was long and amicable. Although Prabhupada did not compromise his stance, particularly on meat eating. Christ says, thou shalt not kill, he said. Yet they are maintaining thousands of killing houses. And they are still passing off as Christians. Guest. And the Mormon guests were trying to be accommodating, as they always are. The guest said, well, they're wrong. Prabhupada, that is the point. Guest, I agree with you. Prabhupada, you should tell them. Well, said the guest, we are. That's what we're here for. It wasn't really what he was there for, but he had to change his stance because they were with Srila Prabhupada and they could tell he was someone very senior. Prabhupada concurred. Yes, tell them you are not Christians. Don't call yourself a Christian. You are persistently disobeying what Christ said. Christ said, thou shalt not kill. The Christians began by killing Christ, crucifying Christ, and that is going on still in large scale, and they are still calling themselves Christian. The Pope is eating meat, and I do not wish to say so many things. These things are going on, and still they are Christians. What can I say? One of the elders asked Srila Prabhupada, would the cutting down of a plant be equated with killing an animal? Prabhupada explained, our philosophy is that we cannot stop killing, but there is no unnecessary killing. Just Krishna Swami, one of Prabhupada's disciples, was there in the room. He added that he had read something in the Mormon scriptures where God had spoken, requesting his followers not to eat meat except in times of famine and starvation. The Mormons agreed, but just Krishna stuck to his point. But slaughterhouses don't do that. They, in brackets, meaning the Mormons, still eat meat. The point, Prabhupada added, is that every living being has to eat another living being. Jivo jivasya jivanam, that we admit. But discrimination is the best part of valor. You have to eat something. But if you have got grains, vegetables, milk, fruits, very nice preparations like that, why should you kill the cow? Well, said one of the Mormons, we believe that the Lord ordained that food for man. And that he even said in the scriptures to the prophet, Prabhupada interrupted him. So he said he ordained cow for your food. Woman, he ordained meat. Yes. Just Krishna. But only in times of starvation and famine. That is the word of wisdom in the Mormon scriptures. Mormon. Well, I don't want to get into contentions about it, but the scriptures also say that he who abstains from meat is not ordained of God. So you can take that in whatever way you want. Prabhupada returned to his original point. The commandment, it is clearly said, thou shalt not kill. So what does it mean? That unless there is absolute necessity, we should not kill. Mormon was trying very hard to keep the conversation cordial. I think you're right. I feel that way. Prabhupada explains some of the practical benefits of cow protection. So when in any civilized country there is ample food for human beings, why they should kill the cow? You can utilize cows in different ways, just like we are maintaining a farm. Not one, but many. We're maintaining cows and we're getting enough milk. And from milk, we can produce varieties of palatable, nutritious food. And that is very, very enjoyable. So let the animal live and take the milk. None of us take meat, but we are not dying. Prophet looked around the room and showed his young, strapping disciples. We're not dying. We have so many nice preparations made from milk, from grains, from fruit. Prabhupada explained that the higher principles of spiritual, he explained the higher principles of spiritual vegetarianism. Besides that, our other principle is that we offer our food to God. So God says, give me vegetables and milk, like that. Patram pushpam palam toyam, yome bhakta prayachchati. So we offer these things and we take what's left over. That is our principle. We're not after killing. We are not after killing or not killing. We are simply after obeying the orders of Krishna. In another conversation a few days before, the head of the Anglican church in Melbourne came to speak to Prabhupada, and he was very nice. And he said to Prabhupada at the end of the conversation, so he said, I understand that you're vegetarians. And Prabhupada said, no, you're not vegetarians. And Prabhupada said, no, we are not vegetarians or non-vegetarians. We are prasadarians. He said, we only eat food offered to Krishna. Prabhupada explained the higher principles of spiritual vegetarianism. Besides that, our other principle is that we offer everything to God. We are simply obeying the orders of Krishna. Krishna says, give me food from the vegetable category. So we offer him very nice, palatable dishes and we eat. That is our principle. So even while eating, we remember God. God has so nicely eaten this food. Let me now take the remnants of that food. So if God says that you remember me always, we can do it by eating. Remembering Krishna, Prabhupada detailed that we are both practical and easy. Quote, he has explained how to remember him while drinking water. We can remember that Krishna is the taste of the water. Who is not drinking water? At least 3-4 times a day we drink water every day. So when you drink and the water quenches your thirst and you feel some nice taste, Krishna says, I am that taste. So where is my difficulty to remember God? If you simply remember this formula, that the taste of water is Krishna, immediately you will remember Krishna. And then Prabhupada explained more and more on this subject. And then he said, so where is my difficulty in thinking of God? Unless I purposely do not do it, it is not that when I go to the church and temple I can remember God and I can remember him but I can remember him 24 hours a day. That is Krishna consciousness. The Mormon was in agreement. I think that's right. And I think that many people I know personally are, what you say, Krishna conscious. They think of God and Christ 24 hours a day too. Yes, Prabhupada said, that is wanted. We obey the orders of Christ. We think of always, and then we are perfect. Either Christ, the Son of God, or God, Krishna, it is the same thing. God and his Son, they are not different. The discussion and atmosphere remained pleasant. At the conclusion of the session, the 2 young men gave Srila Prabhupada a copy of the Book of Mormon, and Prabhupada sold them each a signed copy of Sri Upanishad. Prabhupada was ever a book distributor. So we'll have to finish there. Does anyone have anything that stood out, anything that you could take away from today's class and that you appreciated? Anything that resonated?
I actually have a question.
Or a question.
If you, because in the descriptions always when people describe Prabhupada's lunch, it was seemed that it was very cooked and then served to Prabhupada very immediately. It never was mentioned that actually somebody offered it like we would offer normally.
No, it was cooked and it was offered to Srila Prabhupada as a representative of Krishna. And then Srila Prabhupada he said, you can offer it to me and I'll offer it to Krishna. In fact, there was one story when they brought Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, where is the prasadam? And because there was a whole room full of guests, and Prabhupada liked to distribute prasadam to the guests. And it was running a bit late, and then they brought in a plate of sweets. Prabhupada said, so you can distribute to everyone gets the prasadam. And someone said, Prabhupada is not offering. we were a little bit narrow-minded. So so Prabhupada said, okay, bring. And he looked at it and he said, no, it's not. And he said, no, you can distribute it. We were not familiar with Prabhupada's exalted position as an intimate servant of Krishna. But yes, the food was offered to Srila Prabhupada. Just like today, when you cook something at home to offer to Krishna, you offer to your spiritual master and you ask your spiritual master to offer to Krishna. That is the proper method. Good question. I knew someone was going to ask that question. Anything else? Anything else? Of course, prasadam is so important. Often, when Prabhupada had these room conversations, in fact, not often, always, he insisted that no one would go home without prasadam. Sometimes there was a room full of people, and then, as it happens, sometimes here on Sundays, giving the talk, and then someone stands up and walks out the room just before the end of the class. You know that they're going home and they're going to miss out on taking prasadam. You'd like to say, hey, just hang on, we've got prasadam coming up very soon. Prabhupada didn't want anyone to walk out of the room and go home or leave without taking prasadam. So Prabhupada would make sure, that was a standing rule, so Prabhupada would make sure there was always something for the guests. Sometimes it was a big jar of burfi or pera, or sometimes a big jar of gulab jamans. So there was one lady, Mataji Atri Devi Dasi, she made these gulab jamans. She was competing with another devotee to see who could make the nicest gulab jamans. And Prabhupada said actually Atri's gulab jamans are the best. She didn't put any flour inside, it was just milk powder and milk. And cooked very, very carefully. And they were like a balloon full of water. You know when you can fill a balloon full of water and how loopy it is, but it doesn't, the water stays inside. So it was like that. The gulab jamans were big and they were soft, and when you put them in your mouth, they would explode. It was like a nuclear explosion, and you get like 300 mils of sugar syrup explode inside your mouth. You had to make sure you closed your lips, otherwise it would just gush out. So there was one gentleman from the social welfare department came to meet Srila Prabhupada, impeccably dressed, with impeccably polished shoes, ironed shirt with cufflinks, and a beautiful silk suit, and a nice tie, and impeccably dressed. And then at the end of the conversation, Prabhupada said, so, would you like to give him some prasadam? And he said, no, that's okay. And I said, Prabhupada said, no, you should take. So they brought in this plate of quivering gulab jamans. So Prabhupada said, yes, please take. So he took it. And it was like, and he said, should I just bite a little? No, so Prabhupada said, you have to put the whole thing in your mouth. But he didn't, and he was too squeamish, so he bit it. And the juice squirted out and ran down his chin and onto his shirt and onto his suit. But then he said, it was very nice. So he took another one, and he said, I'd like to take this one home for my wife. He said, I think it will be good soaked in rum. And Prabhupada said, no, you should take it. So he said, all right, and he ate the last one. And then he left, he thanked Srila Prabhupada, and he left completely covered in gulab jamun juice. Sticky, his hands were all stuck together, and his shirt was covered. Anyway, it was a funny event. But Prabhupada always wanted people to take prasadam, and because taking prasadam is so important, that's why at our Sunday feasts there's always prasadam. That is the main attraction. So now we're going to have arati. I'm sorry we've gone over, but sometimes the cooking runs late, so it's probably not the end of the world. So we'll finish there. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.